Well, hello, everybody. Welcome so much to Start the Thing show. My name is Rob Friedoff, and I am your host for the show today. And this show is about starting up side hustles. And obviously, sometimes side hustles also become full time jobs, and we'll see how that all goes today in this episode. We are joined today by Karissa Tew. She's here to share her experience as a pet sitter as a side hustle. Karissa, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So excited you're here. Start the thing, family. Just a FYI, I met Karissa through some friends. We ended up at an event at her in-laws' place. So that was pretty cool to get to run into somebody who is doing a side hustle for a living. And so, Karissa, as we get into the conversation, but before we start talking side hustle, tell me a little bit about yourself and who you are and where you're located.
So I am living in Wilmington, North Carolina right now. My husband and I moved here about 2 years ago from Boise, Idaho. And we just felt like it was time to be closer to his family. And so we kind of picked up and had to find all new jobs. And that's kind of where this whole thing got created and we made it work. So,
I love it. I love it. So, out of moves often come necessities, right? To find income and do some things that can be enjoyable. So, let's go ahead and jump on in. So, at some point, you made a decision to do dog sitting. Tell me a little bit about that inspiration behind that.
so I guess it started, I mean, I've been pet sitting and staying at people's houses pretty much since I was like 15, when you can like get away from your parents' house and be the cool teenager that has like your own house, your own house for yourself for the
Yeah.
weekend. And so I kind of started doing that when I was 15 and just as a side thing, never really thought anything of it. And then when we moved, we kind of needed a flexible job that really, because we were living in a fixer upper that really I needed to be here full time painting and laying floors and hanging cabinets and doing all the things that needed to happen. And so just working a full time job and being gone all that time just wasn't really what we needed for our lifestyle at the time. And so my husband was like, well, let's just start watching a few dogs here and there, and maybe that'll help with the renovation costs.
Love it.
And it just took off from there, and it's been an amazing experience.
So that's
So,
so cool. So it's something that you did kind of to make some extra dollars and kind of be the cool kid when you were 15 to have that own
yes.
house that you could stay at.
Yes.
Started this, but now was it something that you did that all from really when you started 15 all the time, or did you kind of take a break and it wasn't until you were coming back to North Carolina that like, you know what, I really actually kind of enjoyed that, and maybe this would be something that would help the family and the budget and that kind of side of it all.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of had done it like randomly throughout, like whenever somebody would ask me to watch their house when they were on vacation, I always was like, sure, why not? Like, why not do it? And then when we got our first puppy, I took a break because I was like, oh, we can't have, like, I can't be gone. I can't do that. And then we kind of started looking into options with the dog staying at our house so that I could, because obviously you can't leave your dog alone, but it's also a great way for your dogs to socialize and all of that. So,
Got it. So, kind of jumped into it more when you got back to North Carolina, into the family and all of that. So, when you made that move, and sometimes I think when people are trying to think about a side hustle, like getting started can be the hardest part of it. So, how did you get ready and get yourself out there and have opportunities to get your name out there to let people know you were going to be doing dog sitting and providing that service?
yeah, so obviously family helps a lot, but really I did the app Rover. And so you can sign
Okay.
up and you do need to be verified, so you have to have some like references and a few people like write on your behalf that you have done this before and you are good. And they do background checks and everything to make sure you're not going to steal people's dogs or, all the crazy
Yeah.
things that I'm sure somebody would think of if they love somebody's dog enough. But so yeah, so I just started using the app and my business just took off. Like I don't know if it was just because there were so many people in the area that didn't have one yet or so many new people moving. I'm not really sure, but it's
Yeah.
kind of gotten to the point where I don't even need to be necessarily on the app. Um, and it's just word of mouth from here because I built
Okay.
that
Got
business.
it. Did you find, I mean, those technologies certainly helpful. You mentioned Rover. There's another one called WOG and WAG. I'm sorry, I said that wrong. WAG. That's a pretty popular one as well. And I mean, even Nextdoor app and different ways that people do that. Did you find for folks that maybe technology is something that they kind of like and they use it, but they may be a little bit nervous about it? Was it hard to get that set up, or was it pretty straightforward for somebody who might want to give this a try to be able to get in there and establish an account with Rover or WAG or one of those
Yeah.
systems.
So it was actually really straightforward. I mean, it's like filling out an account for an Instagram or a Facebook. Like, it's really just filling out about who you are, what kind of dog owner you are as a person, what your schedule is. Because some people don't do it full time. Some people have full time jobs and they do it at night and they're home with their
Mm,
dogs and they're home with all the dogs at night and on the weekends. So it's kind of just filling out who you are, what your lifestyle's like, and what your home environment's like. So it's pretty easy. I'd say the hardest part is making sure that your references actually fill out the sheets and the reviews. I think it's the reviews,
yeah,
just to make sure that you can actually get on the site, because otherwise you can't even get on the site. So I would say it's honestly harder to get your references to
yeah,
actually do it in a timely manner than anything.
yeah. And that's interesting. So I think I heard you say earlier that one of the ways that you were able to get started was that you kind of started with family and friends, right? And it's probably something that is pretty common to have that opportunity to maybe get a couple of those references from those folks who know you, like you, want you to be successful in this kind of an endeavor. So I think that was a good important nugget too. You mentioned one other thing about where you live, and for those folks that don't know, Wilmington, North Carolina is very much a growing area. But I did want to share too that when we think about a side hustle and whether there's a market for it or there's not a market for it, I was doing a little bit of digging and saw that Grandview Research had this to say about dog sitting in general, and it's an estimated $1.94 billion market currently. What's absolutely insane, that's a large number, but what's really cool is that if you are an animal lover and you want to do things like Carissa's doing, they're actually expecting this pet sitting market to actually grow by over 11% over the next 7 years or so. So already a massive market. Any reason you can see that most markets would just continue that growth? What is it about dog sitting and that need? What do you see from clients? What are they looking for? How can somebody do a good job fulfilling that need that's clearly going to be out there?
Yeah. Um, I mean, really, the market's not going away. Nowadays, pets are part of the family. Especially I mean, cats, they're a little easier to watch, and I've definitely stayed at people's houses to watch cats, but the dogs are a little bit more, they're treated like family members, and so people don't want to drop them off and just say, "Well, I'll see him in a week." Like, okay. So a lot of people really are looking for somebody who's going to be home, or at least like if you're gone during the day, you're making up that time. You're taking them on walks, you're taking them to the park to play when you get home. A
Mm,
lot of people are just looking for their dogs to have kind of like the hotel, their vacation experience while the family's actually on vacation. And since vacations aren't going anywhere and dogs are getting more and more important in the family, dog sitters are just not going anywhere at this point.
yeah, I love it. So we've talked about dogs. You mentioned cats. I'm just curious. Have you ever had a really kind of unique or maybe exotic animal that you pet sat for?
No, I haven't. I've always wanted one, and I don't know how my husband would feel about like an ostrich chilling at our house, but I have always wanted something cool, or like a cow. I don't know. I just think it'd be fun to have an animal like that. But the craziest thing is a cat and a rabbit. So that's about as far as
Okay.
we've gone with this. So
Too funny. I actually, oddly enough, I was talking with a colleague of mine, and his daughter was doing some pet sitting, but she was actually pet sitting a reptile, a fairly good sized boa constrictor. that happened to get out of the cage while she was pet sitting, and it took a couple of days to find said boa constrictor. So that was quite the ordeal. But yeah, I mean, we're talking primarily dogs today, maybe a little bit of cat here and there, but there really is, depending on where you're at in the world, opportunities to pet sit for many more things than just dogs and just cats.
Absolutely.
So you mentioned Rover already as a
Mhm.
tool that you use to get started. I'm curious, are there other ways in which you kind of keep organized, or maybe do taxes, or kind of things that help you be better in your side hustle in your business?
So I do a lot of things on like spreadsheets.
Hmm.
There's a lot of like our income and things like that. I track everything. I track all of our spending. I keep all of our receipts just on the spreadsheets. Because I mean, you do have to spend some money in order to make the money to be a dog
Hmm.
sitter. Like you definitely always want to make sure you have extra leashes, things like that. And then the dogs go home with them, and and then you have to buy more toys because you don't want your couches getting ripped up. So you got to invest in lots of toys.
Yeah,
But
sure.
so I mean, definitely being organized in the spreadsheets. I can't remember what that's called right now. But
Well, there's a lot of different ones: Excel, Google Doc, or Google
Excel,
Spreadsheet,
thank
or
you.
whatnot.
So
So
yeah,
Excel,
using
there you go. Yeah,
Excel has literally saved our budget. It's just been so much easier to track what's coming in and what's going out and what my
okay,
profit is every month based on that.
got it.
And then we've also had to do, I mean, we've had to call vets because dogs have gotten into things, like a
Sure.
dog got into something that they weren't supposed to, and so I had to call the emergency vet. Well, that's $250. So I had to make sure that, so you have to track all that stuff because you just never know what's going to come in and what's going to come out.
Yeah.
Um, and then also I just keep a calendar, and I'm just really diligent about making sure all of the dates are and all the dogs are in there, and it gets crazy sometimes, but
Yeah.
that's kind of the easiest way to do it is just keep a
What
calendar.
what's the most amount of dogs you sat at a time?
15.
Holy cow. Okay. That is a
13,
lot.
13 with R2. So I guess 13 is the
Okay.
most sat, but we've had 15 in the house.
Wow. That's
Yeah, I don't
awesome.
recommend quite that many. I mean, that
Yeah,
was a very stressful couple of weeks, but
I
it was
bet.
it worked out. So,
So I'm curious too, a lot of times, maybe somebody's starting to get going. You mentioned you were, kind of thankfully able to get going pretty quickly in North Carolina. You've been able to maintain the business, but I'm curious, have you used any kind of social media at times, or maybe you know of other people who are in the space that have used Facebook or Instagram or anything like that, maybe that kind of helped their businesses grow? Or would you see that being a way that somebody who's just trying to get started might be able to start and to grow their business?
oh, absolutely. I mean, posting on Facebook, and especially if you have a neighborhood Facebook page,
Mm,
um, like people in our neighborhood, I've never posted on there, but I have replied to people who've been looking for sitters or dogs, sitters or a place for their dogs to go. Or we've rented out our yard before because she had a dog that couldn't be around other dogs, but she didn't have a yard.
okay.
So, I mean, there's like just paying attention to what animal needs are on in your neighborhood on that Facebook page can be a huge benefit. And I've gotten a ton of clients from our neighborhood just looking for, somebody to watch their dog for one night so that they can go on a last minute weekend getaway kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah, that's cool. I could see like Nextdoor app too as another one that's kind
Yes.
of a common one that people are posting for different kinds of things like that. So no, that's pretty cool. So obviously, there's a financial benefit to doing this. I won't make you go into details or anything fun like that, but I'm curious. Besides that financial benefit, what are some other things that have been good being a dog sitter? What have you enjoyed?
Um, I mean, I'm a dog fan. Like, you don't have 15 dogs in your house at once, ruining your yard without being a fan. So I love getting to know the dogs and getting to know their personalities. And it's also really fun, like, getting to watch them, I guess, grow up if you have them younger. We have a lot of dogs who started with our boys because we have two dogs, one's 3 and one's 2. And so we started watching them at the same age as our 2-year-old, and it's kind of fun to just see all their quirks and awkwardness, like kind of like a kid and a teenager, kind of grow out of that. And I don't know, just help the owners with training tips and things like that is also really fun for me. But I don't know, I just love having them in the house. Like I would have 10 dogs if my husband would let me. So this is like my way of having that many.
That's awesome. And that's so interesting. I sit here and I think, man, if dogs could talk, they'd probably say you're the coolest dog mom ever because you always have friends for them to play with and hang out with as a dog sitter, which is probably a big benefit for them, which is pretty cool. What
Yeah.
about what about on the other side of that? I mean, obviously, folks who are listening to this show are interested maybe in side hustles in general, and maybe they're specifically interested in something in the pet industry. But I also want to be really transparent that yes, there can be great money and there can be a good lifestyle that can come out of some side hustles like this, but also spend some time kind of on the challenges. So, what are some of the things maybe that have come up, or some challenges that you think people might need to know about if they were considering, either pet sitting or pet walking as a potential side hustle?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, pet walking, you need to make sure that you can control the dog. I have known some people that have lost the dogs because the dogs they get away from them. So I definitely think it's important as the walker, you just have to always know that you can control them, and if you can't, it's just not the dog. And sometimes I mean, we've had to say no to dogs because sometimes it's just not a good fit for me or
Mm,
for our dogs or vice versa. So I guess just knowing what your limit is and sticking to it and just knowing the money is not going to be worth it in the end is the biggest lesson I've learned. And then if you're having dogs in your home and you have other dogs, just be very mindful that some dogs don't get along. There's just personalities and people don't get along. So, I mean, if we couldn't talk and we didn't like somebody, that we would react sometimes the way that they do. So, I guess just always monitoring and being not far away. Like that's my biggest thing. I
mm.
guess it's just the safety of the animals is just always making sure that if you're not home, the dogs are separated because you just never know what can happen. And then if you are home, just making sure that you've got an eye on them or you're close enough to know what's going on.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I hadn't really thought about that, especially from the being away point. I'm curious then, how does that happen? I mean, are you doing separate rooms, or how are you kind of doing that? Especially when you had, like you said, kind of a large amount of dogs at one point in time. How are you providing that safe space and making sure all of the animals that are in your care are taken care of?
Yeah, so well, obviously with 15, it was extremely difficult. We don't do that every weekend. That was error booking on my end by like six dogs and it just didn't work. It just was not a good weekend. But now we do it a lot slower. We have max three other dogs in the house. And then I always am taking my daycare dogs. And so that's also how we got up to that number. It's not 15 dogs staying here, it's also just dogs coming over for the day and going home at night. So
Okay.
max we've probably had staying in the house is 10 at night. But really it's making sure that all the dogs either they're in the same family and they're together.
Mm,
Um and if we have some older girls or older guys that I've been watching for the last like for a day or throughout the day and I've seen zero issues, they really don't pay too much attention to each other, then that to me is they're safe to be together.
yeah.
So it's just kind of making a judgment call, but always making sure that if we have had issues or if there's a dog that's just super energetic and likes to play, but sometimes can play super rough, that dog gets put in the kennel and or
Yeah.
just keeping them separate. So yeah, at the time when we had a big number, when I was growing my business, um, we had kennels, we had bedrooms, we had everything set up so that the dogs could just, everyone was safe and all of that. Now it's a little bit more, you can hang out in the living room with your kennel. So,
So you said something, and I guess, learning, right? I love these conversations because it's cool for the audience to hear, and I'm always learning as these conversations go on. And you mentioned something I wasn't really thinking about, which was sometimes I think about sitting, I was thinking kind of overnight. But you mentioned that you also have dogs that are just there for the day. So
Hmm.
when you're doing the pet sitting, are you finding that you are having more dogs that are coming just kind of for the day as almost like a doggy daycare kind of a thing? Or are you really having more that are staying overnight or staying for extended periods of times, or is that just kind of depend on the seasons?
So it definitely, I think, depends on the season and kind of as you're growing your business. I started with no daycare dogs and all overnights, but then over time, as those dogs started staying with us,
Hmm.
the parents were like, "Oh my gosh, like they have so much fun here. Can they come during the week or things like that?" And so as the parents start to get more comfortable, they're more comfortable bringing their dogs once a week. And so we have, I think, uh, I mean, depending on the time, sometimes we have like we've had families move and things like that. But I mean, we have had like 8 or 9 retention clients where they come 3 times a week. And
Oh
so
wow. Okay.
those dogs are great and you have them all the time. Um, so yeah, I mean, you have a lot of options in this industry to like have dogs permanently stay at your house. Where if you are working full time, obviously daycare during the day is not going to be really an option unless you're willing to lose your Saturdays and Sundays.
Hmm.
Um, and if you can't walk during the day or you can't go over to somebody's house to check on their dogs and let them out, the overnights is obviously the best. But when you have the flexibility, there's just a lot more options in having dogs just come for the day, walking them,
Yeah.
checking on them. So,
Yeah, curious on that front. So, like, what's the not to get heavily into income, but just to show people that there is a little bit of a market that you can do fairly well. I'm curious, like, if somebody was going to have a doggy daycare for the day, what's
yeah.
that cost versus if they were going to be with you kind of overnight? What's kind of something that you may charge, or maybe you've seen other folks charge for those kinds of things?
I mean, I charge $20 a day for just our daycare, and then I only charge $5 more for if they're staying at night.
Okay.
Because really, you as a dog sitter, I mean, for me at least, I'm home during the day, so my dogs are active during the day. So at night, by 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, they're all tired. They've worn themselves out, unless it's like, I mean, today here was pretty rainy at the beginning.
Oh yeah.
But for the most part, I mean, they're outside playing all day or, they're inside playing with each other. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
and I think depending on again where you're listening to this at, what your market is, um, $20 to $25 is probably pretty low comparative to
it
some of the
actually,
other areas that I've even heard. I mean, I think there's folks that are going for a walk and making similar. So again, some of it's going to be dependent on your market. So you may have to test what's relevant in your market, and maybe for some markets that or maybe more rural and there's not as many people doing this. It may even need to be less than that. But I think that's one of the good things there is kind of figuring out what's that price point that makes sense in your local market. Is certainly helpful. So there was one other question that I wanted to kind of dig into, and it was you kind of started going there. You said something about the fact of training dogs, and you also mentioned that you originally started with it overnight and kind of switched to the daycare kind of option too. I
yeah.
imagine in the space that you're in, there's other ways that maybe if somebody needs to make some more money, that there may be some other things that they could almost put in as kind of like an add-on type of service. Um,
Mhm.
Either now or maybe at other points in times, have there been ways that you've kind of thought of like, hey, we've got a big reno project. I need a new floor. Maybe there's some ways for me to kind of upsell something that's going to provide a better experience for both the pet and for the person that their parent, the pet parent.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as your business grows, you can definitely up the prices. So that is, I mean, like I'm super low for our area, but I also don't take any new clients. I love my
Mm,
retention clients. I have fun with it. So I keep my prices low because I like my dogs. But if you're really in it for making the money and you're really in it for getting the new floors, getting the new kitchen, I mean, there's so many extra things you can do. There's a few rover sitters that they offer, like when you pick up your dog, they offer. like grooming. I don't want to say
Mm.
grooming. They don't groom, but just a bath service.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
which is super nice. It's a pain in the butt for us, but it's great for the owners where your dog is nice and clean when they go home and then they don't smell like they've been around five other dogs all week. So that's also an added thing that actually a lot of even daycare or like doggy boarding places, even facilities, they actually charge extra for that as well.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
things,
I could see that being a one, and then like a obedience training kind of a thing being
yeah,
another kind of an opportunity, or
yeah. If you're good
different
with,
things there.
absolutely.
Are you finding too that with the dogs that you have, um, I would assume that some of those dogs have medications and different things that have to be given. Was there anything that you had to do to learn how to do that, or any kinds of maybe training through Rover or something you maybe did on your own to kind of better understand, or was that really more just conversations with the parents of the dogs as to what needed to be done?
Yeah. Um, I mean, oral medication is pretty self-explanatory. Like my dog takes it with this or my dog eats it with that. It's pretty
Sure.
self-explanatory. So the oral medications was I have two dogs, so that was pretty easy. And then obviously as you have different dogs, there's different things that come up. Like one of our dogs, he had really bad hips, and so when he was here, his parents were gone and his hips started acting up, and so I we had to figure out what to do based on that and what his parents do. Um, and so it's just different things. And one of the dogs, she had a super bad ear infection, and so I actually had to take her to her vet to get him checked out and get her on her meds. And then the vet kind of walked me through it so that I could walk her parents through it when her parents got back home. So
Nice. Yeah.
it just kind of depends on what the dog is and if the parents have that knowledge of it or if they're like, well, we haven't dealt with that yet. So then you have to take the dog to the vet and then you have to teach the parents when they get back. So it just kind of
Yeah.
depends.
There's a phrase that I've got a bunch of kids, and we have a phrase in our house called "semper gumby," which is always flexible. And I would imagine that's probably very true in the world that you find yourself into. That
Yeah.
with all of, especially when you have a lot of dogs and all kinds of different things going on, you've kind of just got to maintain your sanity and stay ready to move kind of in any direction depending on what's going on.
Yeah. I mean, they're easier than kids, but definitely you just kind of have to go with what the flow of their attitude is going with. So,
Yeah, too funny. All right, well, final question, Carissa, and thank you so much for the time today. But if someone were to come up to you and say, "Hey, I hear you do dog sitting," what would you tell them? What would be one or two things that you might engage with them on related to a potential interest in becoming a dog sitter?
I would say do it if you love them. Like it really has been such a great opportunity for us. My husband and I have been able to create an income without me having to leave the house. And really, we've been able to finish our house and do all the updates that I wanted doing this job. I mean, it really has been such an incredible experience. Plus, if you love dogs, like you're just running a hotel for dogs, which is kind of fun. It's a lot of cleaning, so you gotta be okay with that. But other than that, I mean, it really is a good time, and just be prepared for several walks a day, usually with all these guys, especially if they're staying at your house. Keeps them from eating your furniture, so it's always a good idea to get them outside and get them walking. But yeah, I mean, just have fun with it and enjoy it.
I love it. Well, Carissa, on behalf of the Start the Thing audience, thanks so much for your time today and for sharing your experience as a dog sitter. It was super fun to get to spend this time with you, and just thank you again for that time.
Yeah, thank you, Rob. This was great.
Awesome. Well, hey, Start the Thing family. Make sure you drop some comments in here. Say hello to Carissa. And also feel free to come on back at another point in time and watch another show with Start the Thing. Everybody have a great night or a great day wherever you're at. And we will see you in the next show.